I just want to tell you what happened to me. When my church dropped from 40 to 30, I decided to quit the ministry. So one day, I went to my computer and I typed my letter of resignation. I said to myself, I'm going to go back again to engineering. I used to be an engineer before I became a pastor. I said, I will make more money, I will have my weekends and evenings off, and I will never have to deal with difficult people anymore. Not that you have any difficult people in your churches, but I had my share. So I typed the letter, and somebody knocked on the door. So I went to answer the door. Meanwhile, my wife came to use the computer, and she read my letter. She came to me and asked me why I wanted to quit the ministry. I said to her, I have calculated that if the trends will continue the way they are, in 3.5 years from today, there will be just you and I in the church. And I didn't want that to happen. I wanted an honorable exit, as honorable as it could be. She asked me, have you been praying enough? I started to argue with her. I felt her statement was judgmental. She didn't understand what was going on inside of me. Because I did really pray, maybe not with passion and earnestness, but I did pray. Well, after a few minutes of arguing with each other, I lost the argument. So we came up with a plan, and the plan was to devote a whole day to prayer and fasting and see what God is going to do. And we decided the day is going to be Monday, so we will eat our last meal on Sunday night, and the next one will be on Tuesday morning. First Monday, as I was leaving to go to the church, she decided to stay home and pray. She said to me, I want you to pray like your life depends on it. I said, I don't know exactly what that means, but I will do my best. I went to the church, and as you all know, all of you sit approximately in the same spot every week. So I know exactly, especially when you only have 30 people, you know exactly where every one of them sit. So I came to where one of the families sit, and I knelt down to pray for them. And 2 minutes later, I went to sleep. And I slept for 8 hours that day. And I never sleep during the day. But that day, I slept 8 hours. I'm always hyper, always wired, always has to move. But that day, just right there on the pew, I slept for 8 hours. I woke up in the evening, felt refreshed, got in my car, and it dawned on me, what am I going to tell my wife? She greeted me at the door. She said, how was it? I said, it was great. And in my heart, I said, for the 2 minutes that it lasted. Well, I went back again the following week. 3 minutes. They have to give me some credits. That's 50% improvement. I went back again the following week, 4 minutes. That's 100% improvement. I went back again the following week, back to 2 minutes. And I made a very important discovery about myself. I'm not wired to do this. It was a lot easier for me to read a book or plan a strategy, but to sit at the feet of Jesus was hard. You know, we have in the Bible 2 sisters. You know what their names are? Who is the hero of that story? See, we already have a dispute about who is the hero of the story. But I want to tell you a secret. Every pastor and every church are deeply in love with the Marthas of this world. Because nothing in your church will ever take place without a Martha volunteering to do it. If you want somebody to do vacation Bible school, Martha will say, I will do it. If you want somebody to go to the hospital, Martha will do it. But I want you to listen to me carefully. Doing ministry, whatever ministry you do, without sitting at the feet of Jesus, will result in anger and resentment. Because it was Martha who went to Jesus and said, don't you care that I'm left alone to cook 5-course meal for 15 people, and my sister is sitting here doing nothing? And the words of Jesus comes to all of us. Martha, Martha, you worry about too many things. Only one thing is needed. Only one thing. And that is to sit at the feet of Jesus. Well, with the encouragement of my wife, I kept going back again. One day I said to her, I'm going to continue to do this even if it will kill me. But it didn't kill me. Because after a while, God got hold of my heart and changed me. And I actually started to enjoy it. I started to feel God's presence. I started to enjoy it so much, I expanded it for the rest of the week. So I started to take prayer walks. I have been doing that ever since. I encourage all of you to do them. I started to do fasting. I started to devote whole days just to prayer. I started to feel that God had a purpose for my life, that I have power. I started to have hope. Nothing changed in the church. All of the changes happened in me. It was really the greatest change that ever happened. I did this for a whole year. And one day I came to preach. And I looked at my congregation and I saw my faithful 30 people. But that day, there were 4 more people. There was, looks like a young couple, husband and wife, and 2 little girls sitting in the first pew to my left. Our church never had any visitors, never. In fact, our church was so depressing, I wouldn't have gone myself if I was not required to be there. But I saw this couple and I said to myself, they must be visiting some friends and they came to worship with us today. Well, I finished my sermon, I went to the back and I started greeting the people, and they were the last people to come out. And I looked at the man and I asked him, why are you in my church? Now, if you want a hint from me, that's not a good way to greet visitors. And before he answered, I answered for him. I said, you must be visiting some people in our area and you decided to come and worship with us. He said, no, we live across the street. So I said, why you are here? Now I became interested in their story. He said he was fishing in Alaska. And his boss was an ex-Adventist. But this boss, every night, will gather the crew and will share with them his philosophy of life. Different topics every night. But one night the topic was going to church. He said to them, if you ever go to church, go to the Adventist church. He didn't go, but he told them to do it. The man I met that day never have been to church. Not for a funeral or wedding, Christmas or Easter. He was sitting there politely listening to his boss. He didn't care about the philosophy of his boss. It's just his boss. He finished his fishing, came back home. And one day, out of the blue, his wife said to him, I feel the need for God. I really like to go to church. And I used to go to church when I was little with my mom and dad. We used to go to the Catholic church up the road. And I like to go back again. I enjoyed it when I went over there. He said to her, absolutely not. My boss said, if you go to church, you go to the Adventist church. She said, I don't care as long as it is a church. So they start coming to my church. And at that time, I didn't have any Bible study or anything. They were the only two people I ever studied the Bible in the 3.5 years. So I studied the Bible with this couple. And after a few months, I had the privilege of baptizing them. And I'd like you to picture what happened that day, because that day was the most significant day in the life of that church. After the baptism, I brought this couple to the front. And the man was standing here, and his wife was standing next to him. And I was standing next to her. And I attempted to tell their story of how they became Adventist. But about 3 minutes into telling their story, I drifted into telling my story. So I started to share with the congregation about my struggle with a prayer and how I used to come to the church and try to pray for the whole day and go to sleep after 2 minutes. And then I said this, that God changed my heart, because God really specializes in changing hearts. That's his ultimate specialty. He's willing to do it to all of us. And I said, God got hold of me and made me want to do this. And I started to feel his presence in my life. And then I said, this church went for 4 years without any baptism. And that broke my heart. So I said, this year, I started to pray that God will give me 1 baptism. That was my prayer for this year. And then I said this phrase. I said, but the God of the whole universe was listening to the prayers of a discouraged pastor in the middle of nowhere in the state of Washington, and gave me this couple. And when I said that, it dawned on me that when I was at the church praying, I was not alone. Jesus was with me. So I was caught up in the wonder of God. So I repeated myself again. I said, the God of the whole universe cared about me, listened to my prayers, and gave me this couple. And I started to cry because I felt at that moment how special I was to God. Friends, I want to tell you, every one of you here is one out of 7.5 billion people on the planet Earth. That's a lot of people. 7.5 billion. But the minute you come to Jesus, he will drop everything and you will become the object of his attention. At that moment, you will have an audience of 1-to-1 with the King of the whole universe. This is unbelievable, but it is true. God is listening to you. All of these thoughts were going inside of me. And I am crying, and I repeated myself again. And I said, the God of the whole universe is here with us. And He cares about every one of us. He cares about what happens in our lives. He answers our prayers. That's the kind of God we have. And when I said this, a man who was sitting in the last pew of the church, his name was David. He was 70 years old. Came to the front and he stood here. And he went like this. He said, I have 5 children. They all are married, they all have kids, but not one of them cares about God. They did when they were little, but not anymore. But if God answered your prayers and gave you this couple, I'm going to pray and pray and pray some more till God will give me all of my children back. And then he turned from facing me to facing the congregation. He said, I know all of you. We all grow up together. All of you have loved ones who are outside of the Lord. I want you to join me in praying for them. And then he went to the Bible and he opened to Matthew chapter 21 and he read verse 13. My house shall be called a house of prayer. He said, we are going to turn this church from this moment on into a house of prayer. And if that is your desire, come to the front. A woman from that side came to the front. And first she looked at me and she said, I have 3 children. They all are married. They all have kids, but they don't care anything about God. But if God answered your prayers and gave you this couple, I know God will answer my prayer and give me my children back. And then she turned from facing me to facing David, the man who came first. She said, Dave, I am joining you today in turning this place into a house of prayer. 10 people came to the front, making a serious commitment to become men and women of prayer. And that started a movement of prayer in that church. We started to meet on Sunday morning to pray, Monday noon, Tuesday evening, every day of the week. There were a group of people praying in various places around town. On Sabbath, we met before Sabbath school, during Sabbath school, during church, after church. The first thing that happened to that church was a spirit of grace and harmony and love came to that church. Because all of the differences we had just disappeared. They're irrelevant to the cause of God. And then people start showing up at church. 10 years later, that small group of 30 people, it grew to more than 600 people in attendance. They maxed out the place, and a group of them went to another town and planted another church that grew to about 200 people. And to God be the glory. God did a miracle. We read the text, the Lord is willing to do great things, not small things, great things. How many of you have a loved one who is outside of the Lord? Maybe a daughter, a son, a brother. Look at that, every hand went up. Well, I want to give you some really encouraging news. God answered the prayers of my friend David, and all of his children came back to Jesus. And I know God will answer your prayers.